Could you build $1 million HVAC company if your paycheck vanished tonight? In this breakdown, you'll learn exactly how Derek Haynes went from riding in a rusty van as an installer helper to owning a 22-truck service operation, and what nearly destroyed it. The stakes were simple: his crew's paychecks, his newborn's health insurance, and a personal guarantee that could have taken his house. And there's one piece of the story he kept quiet for years: the voicemail that saved him when a state investigator showed up at 6 a.m. We'll get to that voicemail later, but first you need to see how fast an HVAC business can grow, and how fast it can bleed. Derek started in 2007 in Dayton, Ohio, with $1,900 in savings, a used set of gauges, and a beater pickup that leaked oil on every driveway. He was good with his hands, but he was better at noticing waste. His boss drove 40 minutes between calls, stocked the wrong parts, and priced jobs off gut feel. So Derek did what most techs talk about and few do: he went solo on evenings, fixing no-call calls for cash, and tracking every dollar in a notebook. When he finally filed an LLC, he made one rule: no job without a signed work order, even if the customer looked offended. Was that paperwork overkill for a guy with one van? Maybe. But it kept him thinking like an owner, not a hustler. His first real break came from a property manager who owned 8 duplexes and hated getting calls at midnight. Derek offered a simple deal: priority response plus 2 tune-ups per year for $29 a month per unit, billed automatically. That recurring revenue meant he could buy parts before the job, not after the check cleared. By year 2 he had 3 techs, and he paid them hourly plus a spiff for 5-star reviews. He also raised his diagnostic fee to $89 when competitors were at $49, and shockingly, calls increased. Why? Because he answered the phone live, showed up in a clean uniform, and gave options on an iPad. In 2012 he crossed $900,000 in revenue with about 14% net profit, and he thought he'd cracked the code. Then a developer dangled a contract that looked like a shortcut to the next level. It was a 148-unit apartment rehab, all new furnaces and air handlers, and the developer wanted it done in 90 days. Derek bid it at $612,000 because he was scared to lose the job, and he told himself volume would make up the margin. Here's the trap: he didn't build the bid from labor hours and material counts, he built it from hope. To hit the schedule, he hired a subcontract crew he'd never used, paid them by the piece, and stopped visiting the site daily. 2 weeks before final inspection, one of those installs produced a carbon monoxide alarm, then an ambulance call, then lawyers. No one died, but a tenant was hospitalized, the city shut down the building, and the developer froze every payment. Derek's insurer asked for his subcontractor agreements and safety checklists. He had neither because he'd been moving too fast. Within 10 days he was carrying $180,000 in payroll and material bills, with $0 coming in. He tapped credit cards, then a line of credit, then his personal savings, and it still wasn't enough. At 2:13 a.m., the bank text hit: overdraft, accounts restricted, call us. 6 hours later, a state investigator walked onto the site and asked Derek one question: who supervised the work? If Derek answered wrong, he could lose his license and face criminal charges for negligence. That's when he played the voicemail I mentioned, the one he'd saved from the developer's project manager. In it, the manager demanded the subcontract crew keep working even after Derek warned the schedule was unsafe. That audio didn't make him innocent, but it shifted liability, bought time, and kept the investigator from pulling his license on the spot. Still, Derek was basically broke, sued, and staring at a team that needed answers by Friday. He called a retired HVAC owner named Ron Keller, a guy he'd met once at a supply house counter. Ron didn't sugarcoat it: you don't have a bad job. You have bad controls. Ron helped Derek build a 3-part rescue plan in one afternoon: cash, containment, and credibility. Cash meant stopping the bleeding. Derek sold 2 personal vehicles, negotiated payment plans with vendors, and offered employees voluntary reduced hours instead of layoffs. Containment meant lawyers and documentation. He separated the apartment project into a different entity, documented every punch list fix, and pushed for a settlement tied to corrected inspections. Credibility meant systems. Ron made him adopt job costing, daily site logs, and a pre-start safety checklist, no exceptions. The settlement took 9 months, but Derek survived because he changed how the company sold work. He stopped chasing big installs and went back to high-margin service, maintenance memberships, second opinion calls, and indoor air quality upgrades. He set a minimum gross margin target of 55% on service repairs and 40% on replacements, and he used flat-rate pricing with clear add-ons. He also required deposits, 30% at scheduling, 40% at equipment delivery, and the final 30% at startup. Would that scare off tire kickers? Good. Derek wanted customers who respected terms. In 2016 he hired his first full-time service manager, and that hire changed everything. The manager controlled scheduling, part staging, and callbacks, so Derek could sell, recruit, and train instead of running every emergency. They implemented a CRM, automated review requests, and built a scorecard, average ticket, close rate, callback rate, and cash collected weekly. Every Monday they listened to 5 recorded calls and coached scripts like athletes reviewing film. Marketing got equally disciplined. Google local services ads, yard signs only in neighborhoods they could dominate, and a referral bonus that paid after the job was collected. By 2020, revenue hit $4.8 million with a 17% net margin, and Derek bought the building, not the toys. Cash flow is oxygen, pride is optional. He kept 3 bank accounts, operations, tax, and reserve, and he treated the reserve like a non-negotiable bill. In 2024, after the last of the lawsuit payments cleared, Derek ran the numbers, his equity in the company, the real estate, and the cash reserves put his net worth just over $1.2 million. Not from a viral app, not from speculation, just from boring, repeatable service work done with discipline. And the part most people miss is this: the millionaire moment wasn't a big payday, it was a year of no surprises. So what do you copy from Derek if you're in the trades right now, staring at thin margins and unpredictable weeks? First, pricing. If you can't explain your margin target in one sentence, you're gambling. Derek's rule became, never sell labor under 2.5 times burdened wage, and never quote replacements without a written scope and change order language. Second, hiring. He stopped looking for good guys and started hiring for habits, on time, sober, coachable, and clean driving records. He built a simple ladder: apprentice, junior tech, lead tech, with checklists and pay bands, so people knew how to grow. Third, sales. He didn't sell by pressure, he sold by diagnosis, photos, and 3 options: fix, fix better, or replace. Ask yourself, are you giving customers clarity, or are you giving them homework? Fourth, cash flow systems. Every job got a payment schedule, every invoice went out same day, and any account over 10 days late triggered a phone call, not an email. And fifth, risk. Derek now treats subcontracting like borrowing someone else's reputation. If you can't audit it, don't attach your name to it. Let me summarize Derek's playbook in plain terms. Takeaway number 1, bid with math, not optimism. Takeaway number 2, set margin floors, 55% service, 40% replacements. Takeaway number 3, collect deposits and define payment milestones. Takeaway number 4, promote from checklists, fire fast for safety. Takeaway number 5, track for numbers weekly, ticket, close, callbacks, cash. Takeaway number 6, reserves buy time, and time buys options. One more thing, Derek didn't become wealthy because he worked harder. He became wealthy because he stopped betting the company on one giant swing. On the apartment job, he was the hero, the estimator, the supervisor, and the safety officer. That's not grit, that's a single point of failure. If you're running your shop the same way, What happens when you get the flu, or your lead tech quits, or a customer dispute turns into a claim? Derek's answer was boring on purpose: documented processes, someone else owning dispatch, and a calendar built around preventive maintenance, not emergencies. In 2026, he also uses financing and rebate scripts, because customers don't just buy comfort, they buy monthly payments they can understand. He trains techs to present the same 3 options every time, and he audits them weekly, because consistency is what makes marketing work. Systems beat heroics every single week. So if you're watching this in a break room, or in your truck between calls, here's the challenge: pick one control to install in your business this week. Raise your diagnostic fee, write a deposit policy, build a simple hiring scorecard, or start job costing with last month's invoices. Those moves aren't flashy, but they're the difference between owning a job and owning an asset. If this story helped, hit like, subscribe, and share it with one tradesperson who's trying to level up. You're watching Work Boots to Wealth. Drop a comment: what bid do you regret, and what control would have prevented it? I read every one, because that's how we get better together over time.